My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 36, living in a modest two-bedroom brownstone in Boston, and until the night of November 22nd, I believed loyalty was enough to earn a place in your family. That illusion shattered at 12:18 a.m., when my phone lit up with a message that sliced through the dark like a razor through silk. Hey, sweetheart, about Thanksgiving. Your sister thinks it's best if you don't come this year. She's hosting and things might get a bit formal. Hope you understand. No, thank you. No, we love you. Just don't come. Just silence filling the space where love should have been. I stared at the screen. The words didn't make sense, not after everything I'd done. 4 months earlier, my parents were on the verge of losing their home to foreclosure after a failed business deal my sister Whitney orchestrated went south. She panicked, they begged, and I stepped in. I pulled $480,000 from my savings and emergency fund to save that house. The same house I grew up in. The same one I was now being disinvited from. I reread the message again. Your sister thinks it's best. That wasn't a request. That was a decision made in a room I wasn't invited to. Let me tell you something about Whitney. She's always been the sun in our family's orbit. Beautiful, charismatic, unstoppable. Even when her recklessness burned everyone around her, they all still turned toward her light. Meanwhile, I spent my life as the safety net. The fixer. The one who answered every call, wrote every check, and bit my tongue every holiday when she stormed in late with another excuse and another mess. But this wasn't silence. This was rejection. This was being erased. And as I sat alone in my dimly lit kitchen, I realized something terrifying and liberating all at once. I didn't belong to them anymore. Not really. Maybe I never had. So I did what any emotionally mature, financially stable, betrayed eldest daughter would do. I stood up. I walked to my desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out the manila envelope I'd hoped I'd never need. Inside were the legal documents my lawyer had insisted on when I wired the money to save their home. At the time, I thought the paperwork was unnecessary. I thought love didn't need contracts. But that night, love had a deadline, and I was the only one who remembered it. The documents stated clearly if repayment wasn't made within 6 months, the deed currently held in my name would require either full purchase of the property or transition to a rental lease at current market value. And the deadline, Thanksgiving Day. I looked at the clock, 12:26 a.m., 10 hours before their perfect little dinner party. 10 hours before I pulled the rug out from under the woman who had spent her entire life dancing on it, never wondering who was holding it steady beneath her feet. My fingers hovered over the family group chat. I didn't rant, I didn't cry, I simply typed, okay. Then I whispered to myself, let them host, let them toast, let them pretend. And I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Hey Mark, I'm sorry to wake you, but it's time. Send the papers. I exhaled, letting the weight of years fall away with every breath. If you've ever been the one who gave everything, your time, your money, your peace, only to be told you're too much, too intense, or simply not invited, I want you to know you're not alone. If you've ever had to choose between loyalty and self-respect, drop a like and stay with me. Because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about reclaiming your place, even if that means walking away from the very people who raised you. This was no longer about Thanksgiving. This was about truth. And the truth, it was about to show up right on time, delivered to their doorstep, with legal precision and poetic justice. To be continued, I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was anxious. No, I'd lived too many nights swallowed by anxiety, wrapped in it like an itchy wool blanket I could never seem to shake off. This night was different. This night was sharp, focused, almost clean. I spent the early morning hours packing a small weekender bag. Not for drama, just clarity. I had no intention of sticking around to see the fallout. Mark, my attorney, was already preparing the notice to deliver at exactly 4:00 p.m., right as the turkey would be carved and the wine poured. The image of Whitney raising her glass in that house I had saved made something inside me harden. Not out of vengeance, out of peace. I was finally done shrinking. You see, my whole life I'd been told I was too much, too blunt, too driven, too cold. Even when I paid the bills, even when I canceled my vacation to help Mom after her surgery, even when I gave Whitney the down payment for her third failed condo flip, I was always just a little too much for them to handle. But Whitney, she could drain every credit card wreck, every opportunity disappear for months, and still get a standing ovation when she strolled back into the room. She was the firecracker. I was the fuse. And they never noticed I was burning down just to keep her lit. Thanksgiving had always been her stage. She'd wear some designer cocktail dress, pour wine like she was royalty, toss out fake laughs, while our parents beamed like she was their golden ticket to social redemption. I was usually the one doing dishes behind the scenes, making sure the wine hadn't run out, taking care of Grandma when her knees gave out, and nobody noticed. This time I would be noticed. Not because I raised my voice, but because I removed my silence. By 10 a.m., I was driving toward Logan International Airport, a one-way ticket to Sedona booked. I didn't need the Maldives. I didn't need revenge. I needed Red Rock Canyon's stillness and space to breathe in something other than obligation. At 2:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. First, Mom. Sweetheart, don't take it personally. Whitney's just under pressure, you know how she gets. Of course. I always knew how she got. I was the one who carried the consequences of how she got. Then Whitney, Claire, let's not ruin the day, please. We'll make time for you next week. Lunch, coffee, something easy. Something easy, like forgetting me, like pushing me aside like a dish that didn't match her perfect place setting. But I didn't respond, because something in me had shifted. You can't go back to being invisible once you've seen yourself clearly. I parked in the first-class lot, walked into the terminal, ordered an overpriced oat milk latte, and as I took the first sip, Mark called. It's done, he said. Delivered, signed for, witnessed. I thanked him, not because I needed confirmation, but because I wanted someone to acknowledge that this mattered, that I mattered. At that very moment, I imagined the scene: the envelope opened between bites of cranberry sauce and performative gratitude. The words on the page making it clear that the home they sat in was no longer a given. That being family didn't come with a free pass to entitlement. My mind flickered back to the moment I'd offered them the loan. Mom had been sobbing. Dad had looked defeated. Whitney wasn't even there. She'd sent a voicemail with some excuse about a branding retreat. But I was there. I signed the check. I didn't ask questions. I just said, "You're safe now." But now I saw the truth. Safety isn't a favor. It's a privilege. And I'd been handing it out like candy, waiting for someone to say thank you. No more. That house, it was legally mine. And this time, so was the narrative. They could write their stories about how I overreacted, how I made Thanksgiving awkward, how I turned my back on family. But I had the paperwork, and more importantly, I had the clarity. I took another sip and watched the board announce my gate. If you've ever been the one cleaning up after other people's mistakes, if you've ever been told to stay quiet for the sake of keeping peace, if you've ever wondered if your voice mattered, it does, and you deserve to use it. If you've ever carried a family that never once asked how much it weighed on you, share your thoughts in the comments. Let someone else know they're not alone, because the moment you stop apologizing for being enough is the moment you start becoming unstoppable. I walked to my gate, not looking back. The storm was coming, but I wasn't going to be there to hold the umbrella this time. When I landed in Arizona that evening, the air was drier than anything I'd breathed in months. It felt honest. Unforgiving maybe, but honest. There was no pretending in Sedona's crimson dust and jagged cliffs. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain my existence to anyone. I turned my phone off airplane mode and watched it light up like a pinball machine. First, Dad, this is extreme, Claire. Let's talk like adults. Then Whitney, again, you're acting like a child. Over one dinner, grow up. And the one that hit the hardest, Mom, please, don't ruin this for your sister. She's trying so hard. Trying, that word made my stomach knot. Whitney never had to try to get anything. Not forgiveness, not money, not space. She just existed, and the world bent to accommodate her. Me, I had to beg for acknowledgement. But I'd learned something dangerous over the last 24 hours. When you stop shrinking to fit into other people's comfort zones, they panic. They scramble to shove you back into the version of yourself that served them best, silent, agreeable, useful. And I wasn't going back. I checked into a quiet Airbnb tucked between red rock walls and desert pines. No noise, no expectations, just my thoughts, and a thick folder I had carried in my backpack like a talisman. Inside were not just the legal documents about the house, but everything else I had collected. The financial transfers from my parents' retirement account to cover Whitney's latest business pivot. The Venmo receipts she sent me for luxury dinners she'd claimed were client meetings. The credit card statements showing 5-star resorts in Aspen, Miami, and San Diego, all booked, while my mother texted me asking if I could help cover their property taxes just this once. I wasn't bitter, I was tired. And tired people, when they finally get still enough to see clearly, are the most dangerous kind of honest. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Accountability. In it, I dropped every screenshot, every email, every PDF. Not for revenge, for record, for proof, for my own sanity. Because for years I'd been gaslit into believing I was the problem every time I asked simple questions like, when will Whitney pay that back? Why does she need another car? Shouldn't we say no sometimes? Every time the answers came back with a sigh and a lecture about family harmony. What they meant was Claire stop being difficult. What they meant was, let Whitney take what she wants. But now there was a digital paper trail, a history, a truth. The next day, I woke up to a voicemail from my dad. His voice was sharp, brittle, in a way I'd never heard before. Claire, this is serious. Your mother's in tears. Whitney's furious. We didn't think you'd actually follow through. You need to undo this. Undo this. Like this was a spilled glass of milk. Like I hadn't warned them. Like I hadn't been clear, calm, and even generous every step of the way. I didn't respond, because I was done managing their emotions while they trampled mine. Instead, I took a walk to a trail just outside town. I climbed until I could see the horizon curve around me like an open palm. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of truth, of clarity, of relief. And that's when it hit me. For years, I'd believed love meant sacrificing myself, that if I just did enough, gave enough, tolerated enough, they'd finally see me. But now I understood, love without boundaries isn't love, it's control. And I wasn't available for that anymore. If you've ever been told you were too much, too intense, too principled just for asking people to be decent, drop your story below. Someone else might need to hear it today. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fight back. It's walk away, quietly, completely, and let the silence do the talking. Because I wasn't the villain in this story. I was just the first person willing to tell the truth. The following morning began with a single simple decision: I wasn't going to check my messages. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally did about myself. I brewed a small pot of coffee and stepped onto the deck of my Airbnb, the Arizona sky unfolding above me in breathtaking shades of amber and rose. There was a peace in that stillness. A peace I hadn't tasted since, maybe ever. And yet, beneath it all, I knew the storm back home was brewing fast. But storms don't scare me anymore, especially not ones I didn't create. Around mid-morning, I opened my laptop and reread the contract for the third time. Every clause, every timeline, every signature was intact. When I sent that money to save their house, I didn't do it to hold anything over their heads. I did it to help. I did it because I couldn't stomach watching my parents lose everything. But help, I've learned, without limits turns into a leash, and they'd been tugging on that leash for far too long. At 11:47 a.m., I received an email from Whitney. No subject line, just 4 words in the body. You can't do this. There it was again. The entitlement disguised as victimhood. The assumption that no matter what line she crossed, I'd redraw the boundary further out just to keep the peace. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the second document in my folder. A breakdown of every month they'd failed to meet the payment terms. Rent-free living, no accountability, and zero intention of honoring the agreement. I wasn't the problem. I was just the only one willing to say this is a problem. Later that afternoon, Mark texted. Just got off the phone with their new attorney. He tried to argue duress. No case. Of course he did. Whitney must have fed them a story about me being manipulative, cold, calculating. She was always good at spinning narratives. That's how she managed to turn every failure into someone else's fault, and every success into a self-made myth. But this time the documents spoke louder than her performance. I sent Mark a single sentence: proceed with the eviction timeline. And with that, the final lever was pulled. That evening, as I watched the red sun sink behind Cathedral Rock, my phone rang again. This time I answered. It was Whitney. Her voice was clipped, rattling with a mix of disbelief and fury. Claire, my boss, and his wife are coming in less than 3 hours. Do you even understand what you've done? Yes, I said calmly. I've enforced an agreement. You're insane. Mom's crying. Dad's losing it. You've ruined everything. No, I said again, quieter this time. I stopped pretending nothing was broken. There was a long pause. Then she spat out the accusation I knew was coming. You've always been jealous of me. I closed my eyes and let the words hang in the air, absurd in their familiarity. No, Whitney, I've been exhausted by you. There's a difference. And then for the first time in my life, I said what no one had ever dared to. Mom and Dad don't love you more. They're just afraid of what you'll do when they say no. The line went quiet. I could hear muffled voices in the background kitchen clatter the rising panic of a narrative slipping from her grip. And I didn't fill the silence. Because sometimes letting the silence stretch is how you teach people to finally listen. I ended the call before she could respond. Not out of cruelty, but because I'd already said everything that mattered. And in that moment, watching the desert shift from gold to deep violet, I felt lighter. If you've ever been accused of being cold simply because you set a boundary, tell me, how did you find the strength to hold the line? Because some of us were never cold. We were just finally done being burned. And when the people around you only love you when you're small and silent, the bravest thing you can do is grow anyway. I poured myself another cup of coffee and let the world keep spinning this time without me carrying the weight of everyone else's chaos. 2 hours after I hung up on Whitney, I got the final call of the evening from Mom. I knew it was coming. I knew that eventually she'd find her way into this, trying to smooth the tension like she always did. That was her role. Not the truth teller, not the decision maker, just the keeper of peace, no matter how broken that peace really was. Claire, she began, breathless, like she had run a marathon, just dialing my number. Please, can we talk? I was sitting cross-legged on a flat rock near the Boynton Canyon Trail, the sun low and crimson behind me. I didn't say anything. I let her speak. This is so important for Whitney. She's worked so hard this time. This dinner, her firm, she's trying to build something for herself. And your father and I, her voice cracked. We just want one holiday where everything goes smoothly. Is that too much to ask? I took a long breath. The wind moved softly through the pines around me. Nature doesn't argue. Nature just exists. And I think in that moment I understood why it was so hard for me to go home. Because home was built on conditions, on performances. And I had finally stepped off the stage. No, Mom, I said. It's not too much to ask, but you're asking it of the wrong person. She fell silent. I could hear her shift the phone, maybe pacing. I'm not punishing Whitney, I continued. I'm just not protecting her from consequences anymore. You've always been so rigid, Claire, she whispered. So unforgiving. Can't you bend just this once? That was the moment. That was the phrase that broke me open in a way I hadn't expected. Do you know how many times I've bent, Mom? I said, my voice steady, but rising. Do you know how many times I gave up weekends, gave up money, gave up myself, just to make sure the rest of you could keep pretending things were fine? More silence. I bent so far I said I forgot what standing felt like. That's when I heard it. A small breath on the other end of the line. Not angry, not defensive, just tired. I didn't know, she said softly. I didn't see it. You didn't want to, I replied, and I didn't know how to show you without breaking everything. A long pause passed between us, hanging like a fragile thread. Then she said something I never expected to hear. We'll talk, all of us, when you're ready. I nodded even though she couldn't see it. I'm not ready now. I understand, she whispered, but I hope someday you'll come home. I didn't answer, because I didn't know where home was anymore. Was it the house I bought for them? The one they'd filled with secrets and silence? Or was it here in this moment where I felt more like myself than I had in years? As the sun dipped fully behind the hills, I stood up, dusted off my jeans, and turned toward the path back. The Thanksgiving dinner would be starting now, the guests arriving, Whitney in her sleek cocktail dress pouring wine with that bright, curated smile. But this year, her spotlight would be a little dimmer, a little shakier, because this time the stage had a crack running right down the center and she knew exactly who had drawn it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about it. If you've ever been told to keep the peace at the cost of your own, let me ask you, what did it take for you to finally choose yourself? Share your turning point below. Someone may need your story tonight. Because sometimes choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you whole. And if you've ever been the backbone of a family that never said thank you, hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. Your voice matters here. Your boundaries are not a betrayal. They're a beginning. I walked back toward the road as darkness settled, not with heaviness, but with the steady certainty of someone finally walking their own path. The next morning, the desert was quiet again, like it had exhaled all the tension from the night before. I, on the other hand, hadn't. Not yet. I sat with my coffee and watched the sky shift from lavender to blue, waiting for the inevitable fallout. At 8:03 a.m. it came. The doorbell rang, virtually at least, a video message from Mark. He had followed through with precision, delivering the notice to the front door of the house while Whitney was entertaining her carefully curated dinner guests. He recorded it for legal reasons, but the footage said more than just due process. In the video, you could see her standing at the door, wine glass in one hand, silk blouse pristine, her polished mask in full effect. She opened the envelope, read the first few lines, and something changed in her face. She froze. then crumpled the paper in her hand as if that would undo what was written on it. Behind her, laughter from the living room faded into awkward silence. She turned to her guests, lips pulled into a tight smile, eyes already wild. And that was it. The moment Whitney's empire of illusions began to collapse right there in the house I paid for at the dinner, I wasn't good enough to attend. I closed the video. Not out of satisfaction, but something else. Sadness. Maybe, but also distance. Watching it felt like watching a documentary about someone I used to know. Not a sister. Not anymore. Just a familiar stranger whose choices had finally caught up with her. By noon, the messages came faster. Dad, I didn't agree to this. That contract was never meant to be enforced. Whitney, you're sick. You planned this. You ruined me. And Mom again, Claire, please stop this before it's too late. But what they didn't realize was that it had been too late for years. When they made me the financial emergency line and refused to set limits for Whitney. When they let her spend while I saved. Lied while I worked. Demanded while I gave. It had been too late the moment they decided love could be conditional as long as she was the one benefiting. But love with strings attached isn't love. It's manipulation. And I was done being tied up in it. Still, I knew what they feared wasn't just the eviction. It was the proof. Because it wasn't just the house anymore, it was the evidence. The documents in my folder didn't just show unpaid rent. They showed transfers from my parents' joint retirement fund money, Whitney access to pay off her secret credit card debts, loans she convinced them to take out just for a few months, luxury purchases disguised as business expenses, all signed, all traced. Every lie she thought she'd buried now outlined in red and black. I had the records, I had the statements, I had the signature comparisons from the accountant I hired 6 weeks ago after I noticed an unfamiliar scribble on a loan application in Dad's name. Yes, she had forged his signature, and if I pushed it, it wouldn't just be an eviction. It could be a felony, but I wasn't there yet. I didn't want destruction, I wanted accountability. There's a difference. I stared at the last open tab on my laptop, the letter from my father's investment firm confirming multiple wire transfers to Whitney's holding account. Transfers made after I had paid off their mortgage. After all that help, she still bled them dry. Still, they were furious at me for pointing it out. That was the real wound. If you've ever uncovered a truth so big, so undeniable that it cost you the people you thought would stand beside you, tell me in the comments. What did you do when you became the only one willing to name the lie? I shut the laptop gently and looked out at the open sky again. You can't force people to see what they refuse to believe. But you can show them the consequences. And when they finally feel it, when the curtain falls and the truth takes the stage, you don't have to say, I told you so. You just have to keep walking. The texts had stopped by sunset. It wasn't relief, I felt it was silence. The kind that seeps into your bones after too many years of white noise and whispered manipulation. That evening I sat by the window, a warm drink in my hands, watching the desert cool beneath a pastel sky. I'd imagined this moment so many times, what it would feel like to finally hold my ground, to say no, to be unshakable. I thought it would feel victorious. But honestly, it felt like grief. Not grief for the house, not even for Whitney. I was grieving the version of me who thought she had to earn love by being useful. The one who picked up the pieces every holiday, kept quiet during every insult, and smiled through every second-hand apology. That version of me had died the moment I said proceed with the eviction timeline. My phone buzzed once more before midnight. It was from an unknown number, probably a burner phone Whitney had bought since I'd blocked her main line. The message was short. You've always been jealous of me, but now you're just cruel. This is our house. Our house. 2 words that pulsed with entitlement. That was the part she never understood. It wasn't hers, not legally, not morally, not after everything. But she had been raised to believe that consequences were for other people, that rules bent around her needs, that someone, usually me, would sweep in and fix it all. And when that person stops showing up, the world suddenly feels unfair. But it's not, it's just real. I didn't respond. I powered down my phone and let the dark wrap around me like a blanket. This wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. And clarity is rarely comfortable, especially for those who've never lived inside it. The next morning, I opened my inbox and saw an email from Mark. Subject: final step before formal eviction. He had attached a timeline, an updated document outlining the legal next moves and the warning clause, clear and binding. They had until January 15th to either buy the house at market rate or begin paying rent. Otherwise, we'd proceed with formal eviction. It was fair, more than fair, but I knew what would happen next. They'd call it cold. They'd call it betrayal. But really, it was the first honest boundary I'd ever drawn in my life. By noon, I received another email, this one from a woman I hadn't heard from in years. Grandma. Her subject line, "You did it." The body was short but powerful. "You should see the chaos you left behind." Whitney's perfect dinner exploded. The guests saw the legal documents. Your dad was furious, your mom sobbing, and Whitney lost it. Her boss left early. That promotion, gone. But something tells me this was the only way they were ever going to see the truth. "Proud of you, sweetheart." "Grandma." I sat there stunned. I hadn't told Grandma anything directly, not recently, but she'd always been the only one who truly saw me. She'd always seen through Whitney's charm and into the manipulation. She just never had the leverage to speak up. But I did, and I used it. That night I walked barefoot across the patio, cool red dust coating my feet. I stood beneath the stars and let myself cry. Not from pain, not from regret, but from release. I wasn't their fixer anymore. I was just Claire, and that was finally enough. If you've ever broken the cycle of enabling, of silence, of pretending everything's okay, leave your story in the comments. This space is for you. And if you've carried the weight of a whole family's dysfunction on your back, hit like, subscribe. And let me remind you, you don't have to carry it alone anymore. Because sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is simply stop. 2 weeks passed. The desert became my chapel, my retreat, my reckoning. Every morning I hiked a little farther into silence. Every evening I sat with thoughts I'd avoided for years, memories I used to shove aside with busyness or obligation. But there was nothing to distract me out here. No emergency texts, no guilt-soaked phone calls, just the slow and steady return of my own voice. And just when I started to believe the chaos might finally die down, my phone lit up. Grandma. Her name appeared like a soft bell before a storm. I answered. "You should see the mess you left behind," she said with a chuckle that was more relief than amusement. I smiled. I can imagine. "Oh, sweetheart, you have no idea." Whitney's boss showed up to the dinner right as the envelope was opened, saw the whole meltdown. The screaming, the denial, your father trying to play damage control. Her reputation took a hit she won't be able to spin this time. I didn't feel joy hearing that. I felt, still, neutral. That promotion she kept bragging about, Grandma added, gone. Her firm's HR opened a review the next morning. I sat back in the chair on my porch, exhaling into the red clay wind. "And your father?" She continued, her voice shifting to something heavier. "He found the credit card statements Whitney had been hiding. The ones in his name. Thousands in cash advances, Claire. Thousands." I closed my eyes. I'd known, of course. I'd found the evidence myself. But hearing that he finally saw it, that hit differently. For so long, he refused to see anything that might cast Whitney in a less than flattering light. I wasn't sure if it was pride, fear, or delusion. Probably all three. "She's still spinning," Grandma said, "still trying to claw her way out. But your father, he's not covering for her anymore. That's progress." Progress, it was a word I hadn't dared apply to them in years. In fact, Grandma continued, "That's why I called. They want to talk. All of them. Your mother, your father. Whitney, too. They want a meeting." I stayed quiet. "You don't have to say yes," she added quickly. "I told them that, but I think it's different this time." I watched a hawk circle the sky, effortless. My family never apologized. They rerouted, redirected, gaslit, minimized, but apology, that was never on the table. So this request, it wasn't nothing. "I'm flying back tomorrow anyway," I told her. "Tell them to meet me at my place. The day after." "Will do," she said gently. "And Claire?" "Yeah. I've been waiting 15 years for someone to stand up to Hurricane Whitney. I'm proud of you." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you, Grandma, for always seeing me even when no one else did." We hung up, and I leaned back in the chair, staring at the horizon like it held an answer. I didn't know what that meeting would bring. Accusations, denial. Maybe another storm, but I wasn't the same person they had dismissed, manipulated, or used. I wasn't the girl hoping to be chosen anymore. I was the woman who chose herself. And I knew this. Whatever came next, I wouldn't be bending to keep the family from breaking. They'd already broken it. Now it was their turn to put the pieces together. If you've ever stood up to someone everyone else was afraid to confront, tell me what gave you the strength. Share your moment in the comments. Because the truth is, sometimes it only takes one voice to stop generations of silence. And if you've ever been the one to finally say enough know this, that's not rebellion. That's healing. 2 days later, I returned to Boston. It was snowing. The city was blanketed in that first soft white layer that makes everything look cleaner than it really is. Temporary, beautiful, fragile, like peace in my family. I took the elevator up to my condo. The place was still exactly how I left it. Quiet, warm, filled with choices I had made for myself. A small framed print hung on the wall by the door, 6 words in bold black type. You are allowed to take up space. I'd bought it after my first therapy session. Back then, I barely believed it. Now I knew it in my bones. They arrived 10 minutes early. Dad looked older, smaller somehow, like the weight he used to carry in arrogance had thinned into something almost human. Mom's eyes were puffy, but soft. Whitney, well, she looked like a shell of herself. Gone was the blowout, the heels, the signature scent of designer confidence. She wore jeans, a plain gray sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, makeup-free, vulnerable. For the first time in my adult life, Whitney didn't look like a storm. She looked like the aftermath. No one spoke as they entered. I didn't offer hugs, I didn't offer coffee, this wasn't a reunion, it was reckoning. I sat across from them and opened my laptop. 3 files were waiting. I clicked the first, an online property listing of a modest, well-kept home in the suburbs. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. Affordable, but far from what they were used to. This, I said calmly, is option 1. They leaned forward. You sell your furniture, you downsize, you live within your means. I clicked to the second file, a clean professional business plan. Option 2. Dad, I remembered you always wanted to open your own tax firm. I worked with a consultant to help you launch one. You'd need a small loan, but I'm willing to document it fairly. His eyes widened. And option 3, I said, clicking the last slide, is for you, Whitney. Her shoulders stiffened. It's a treatment center, I continued, for financial therapy, compulsive spending, and yes, chronic lying. They have a program that focuses on behavioral recovery and accountability. Whitney scoffed. You think I need therapy? Before I could respond, Dad lifted his hand sharp, commanding. Let her finish? I paused. Even in that small moment, something shifted. The man who once brushed off my concerns with phrases like, that's just how your sister is, was now letting me speak. Fully. I turned to them all. You don't get to keep the house unless you meet one of these conditions. That was always the agreement. But this isn't punishment. This is a second chance. A clean slate. A path out if you choose to walk it. Mom's eyes filled, her voice barely a whisper. Claire, when we found those credit cards in Dad's name, we realized we could face charges. We were so blind. Dad nodded, a rare crack in his usually firm voice. We've been such fools. I've already contacted the creditors, I told them. They're willing to forego pressing charges if Whitney enters treatment and sets up a repayment plan. Grandma and I are willing to cover the initial costs. Whitney stood, her face crumbled. Why are you helping me after everything I've done? I looked at her, truly looked. For the first time, I didn't see the performer. I saw the frightened little girl who used to crawl into my bed when there was thunder outside. Because you're my sister, I said softly. And I still believe that version of you is in there. But I'm not going to enable the one who's destroyed everyone around her. You have to decide who wins. The room was still. Dad cleared his throat. We'll take the smaller house. We need to start over. Mom nodded through tears. Whitney swallowed hard. I'll do it. I'll go to the program. I don't want to be this person anymore. Her voice cracked. I saw my boss's face when he saw those papers. I saw myself, for the first time. I reached for the folder beside me and handed it to them. We start Monday. If you've ever stood your ground with someone you loved, not to punish them, but to finally give them a path toward growth, share your story below. That's strength. It changes everything. Because this isn't about revenge, it's about rescue. Even if they don't know they're drowning until you stop trying to pull them ashore. The meeting ended in a kind of silence that wasn't awkward, it was sacred. It was the kind of silence that hangs in the air after truth has been spoken and received. No yelling, no defensiveness, just 4 people sitting with the weight of who they had been and who they might still become. As my family gathered their coats and papers preparing to leave my apartment, Whitney lingered. Her eyes wandered to the manila envelope I had closed and tucked under my hand. Then she looked at me. That trust fund, she asked hesitantly, the one from Grandma. Did she really change it? I didn't answer right away. I watched her face stripped of arrogance, now stripped of expectation. She wasn't demanding. She was scared. Scared in the way only someone who's finally seen the fallout of their choices can be. No, I said quietly. But you needed to believe she did. Her brows pulled together. Why? Because I replied you had to understand that nothing is untouchable. Not money, not relationships, not trust. I saw her throat tighten, so it's still there. It will be, I said gently, after you complete the program, begin making amends and show a consistent pattern of change. Not for my sake, not for Grandma's, for yours. She nodded slowly. That's fair. Fair. The one word I'd never heard from her lips before. She reached out almost unsure and hugged me. It was awkward, tentative, but it was real. And for once it wasn't performative. When they left, I stood by the window for a long time watching snowflakes drift past the glow of the street lamps. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt emptied out. But in the best way. Like I had finally poured out years of silent sacrifice and swallowed pride, and now there was space inside me for something else, something lighter. My phone buzzed, a text from Grandma. Proud of you, sweetheart. Sometimes the most loving thing we do is say no. Sometimes it's the only thing. I typed back 2 words, thank you. Then I let my phone drop to the couch beside me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to keep it close just in case they needed me. Because maybe, just maybe, they'd finally start needing themselves. Later that night, I lit a single candle curled up in my reading chair and opened my journal. A phrase I hadn't written in over a decade appeared at the top of the page. What if peace was never meant to be earned? What if peace is what's left when you stop proving, fixing, absorbing? What if love isn't about sacrifice but boundaries? What if I had spent all these years trying to buy a seat at a table that I had built, and they still asked me to eat outside? And what if the real healing began when I stopped knocking? I closed the journal. Let that sit. If you've ever found yourself forgiving someone not because they deserved it, but because you finally did leave a comment below, share your turning point. Someone out there might be waiting for permission to let go. Because forgiveness isn't weakness, it's clarity. And boundaries aren't the end of love. They're where healthy love begins. If this story resonates with your journey, tap the like button, leave your thoughts below, and subscribe. Your voice has power here. You deserve space. You deserve peace. And most of all, you deserve to stop begging for a seat at the table you built. This was just one chapter, but it was the one that changed everything. And I know I'm not the only one writing a new ending. I woke up the next morning to a soft knock on my door. Unexpected, light, almost hesitant. It was 8:12 a.m., and the city hadn't fully woken up yet, just a few cars humming outside, snow still clinging to the rooftops like memory. I opened the door to find a small box on my welcome mat. No card, no signature. Just brown paper twine and a single word scribbled across the top, Claire. I brought it inside, placed it gently on the kitchen counter, and opened it slowly. Inside was a folded piece of stationery I recognized instantly, Grandma's. Her handwriting always looked like it belonged in a love letter or an old recipe book. Neat, warm, patient. Claire. When I was your age, I thought love meant saying yes. Yes to duty, yes to silence, yes to pain. It took me too long to realize that sometimes the most powerful love starts with no. I wish I had learned sooner. I'm glad you did. Grandma? Beneath the letter, wrapped in tissue, was her locket. The one she never took off. Inside, a photo of my mother as a child, and me as a baby. I stood there for a long time, not crying, not shaking, just still. Because in that moment I understood that this wasn't just about me and Whitney. This wasn't just a financial line in the sand. This was generational. 3 generations of women, each one trying to hold a broken system together. Grandma did it with silence. Mom with worry. Me, I chose the fire. Not to burn it all down, but to forge something better. That evening, Whitney texted me from the treatment center. Her message was short. Checked in. Day 1. I'm scared. I stared at those 3 words, I'm scared, and felt something shift. Not in pity. Not even in forgiveness, but in recognition. Because I remembered the girl she used to be. The one who followed me everywhere, who copied my handwriting, who used to crawl into bed with me when Dad yelled too loud or Mom cried in the kitchen. That girl wasn't evil. She wasn't broken. She was just lost in a family that only knew how to love through performance and denial. I replied, you're not alone. Keep going. I didn't offer more. I didn't promise anything, but it was enough for now. Later, Mom called, just to talk. No requests, no guilt. Just a soft, tentative voice telling me about the new house they were touring next week. Smaller, she said. Quieter. But maybe that's what we need now. Maybe that's what we all need. And Dad, he texted a single line that made me sit down. Starting over, with your business plan. Thank you. I'd spent years believing he didn't hear me. That he'd chosen Whitney, chosen comfort, chosen silence. But maybe he hadn't heard me because I'd been whispering. Because I hadn't yet learned how to speak without asking permission first. Now he was listening. All of them were. If you've ever broken the silence in your family, if you've ever chosen truth over comfort, tell me your story. What happened when you finally said enough? Leave a comment. You never know who you're giving permission to. Because when one person chooses healing, it echoes. And if you've ever felt like your boundaries made you the villain, I promise you there's power in standing your ground. If that's you, like this video, drop your story below and subscribe to this space. This is where people like us belong, those who chose courage over compliance. You're not too much. You were just the first to wake up. A week passed. Winter settled in like a heavy sigh blanketing the city in quiet. The streets outside my window had turned silver overnight, and for once I wasn't rushing through it. No inbox to triage, no late-night calls to bail someone out of a mistake they swore they'd never repeat. My days slowed down. My breathing deepened. I had space to think, to feel, to remember. And that's when the guilt started creeping in. It surprised me. After everything after the documents, the boundaries, the reckoning, I thought I was done with guilt. But it's funny how years of playing peacemaker can program you to flinch at stillness, at peace, at choosing yourself. That Tuesday afternoon, I got an email from the treatment center Whitney had checked into. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't an update. It was an invitation. Family reconnection session, optional. Claire Donovan. You've been requested to participate in a closed group session this Friday at 3:00 p.m. My first instinct was to say no, but then I remembered what Grandma had said, that this was a generational pattern, and if I really wanted to break it, it wasn't enough to enforce consequences. I had to show up for the healing, too. So I went. The room was plain, no candles, no essential oils, just chairs in a circle and a whiteboard with a single phrase written across the top. Radical honesty begins where silence ends. Whitney sat across from me. She looked better than I expected. Not fixed, not transformed, but real, present. Her eyes weren't darting. Her hands weren't fidgeting. For once, she wasn't performing. The counselor introduced us, set the rules, then said, "Whitney, you asked Claire here. Begin whenever you're ready." Whitney looked at me. "I don't remember the last time I saw you as a person," she said softly. "I think I only ever saw what I needed from you. Money, backup, silence." I didn't interrupt. I used to tell myself you were cold, unfeeling. But now I know you were tired. Tired of being the backup plan. Tired of cleaning up my mess. She looked down. I blamed you because it was easier than looking at myself. I waited. And I still don't know if I can ever make it right. But I want to try. Silence hung in the room again. Not like before. This time it felt like space being made. Then the counselor looked at me. "Claire." My throat was tight. Not with anger, with restraint. "I think I began slowly, that I spent years trying to save you, so I wouldn't have to look at how no one was saving me." Whitney nodded, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. I used to believe that setting boundaries was selfish, that walking away made me cruel. But now I know it was the only way to give either of us a chance. The counselor let the silence stretch. Then she said, "This is what accountability looks like. It's not a fix, it's a beginning." Whitney reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter. "I've started writing down the money I owe everyone, and the promises I broke. I want to earn back what I can." She handed it to me. I didn't open it, not yet, but I took it. And I said 3 words I never imagined saying out loud. "Thank you, Whitney." Not for the apology, not for the money, but for finally stepping into the truth with me. After the session, I walked out into the cold Boston air, my coat barely enough to hold off the wind. But for once, I didn't feel frozen. If you've ever found yourself in a room with someone who once hurt you and watched them try to become something better, tell me what that moment was like. Did it change anything? Leave a comment below. Your story might help someone believe people can change. And if you're carrying anger because you had to be the strong one, remember this. Healing isn't just about cutting people off. Sometimes it's about building something new from the ashes. Hit like, subscribe, and keep walking with me. Because the journey doesn't end when the apology comes. That's when it really begins. 3 weeks after that session, my living room looked nothing like it had on Thanksgiving. No tension, no ghost of old arguments floating in the corners. Just sunlight pouring through the windows, and a quiet I had fought hard to earn. My parents were seated across from me on the couch. Mom with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Dad looking straight ahead, his jaw clenched, not out of anger but out of effort. The kind it takes when you're not used to admitting you've been wrong for a very long time. I had invited them, not because I was ready to forget or even fully forgive, but because something in that therapy room with Whitney had opened a door inside me. One I didn't know still existed. A door to possible healing, possible rebuilding, possible truth. We sat in that quiet for a minute before Dad broke it. "We sold the house," he said, "yesterday." I nodded slowly. "How do you feel?" "Relieved," he said, surprising both himself and Mom, and ashamed, but mostly relieved. "We should have never let it get this far," Mom added quickly. "We kept thinking things would fix themselves, that if we just kept the peace, Whitney would grow out of it." I looked at them, not with resentment, with understanding. "I know," I said. "That's how I lived too, until peace cost me everything." Mom's eyes brimmed. "We didn't realize how much we leaned on you." "You didn't lean," I said gently. "You climbed on top of me and expected me to carry the whole family on my back." Silence again, but not the defensive kind, the kind that listens. Dad cleared his throat. "The retirement fund? It's gone. She drained more than we thought." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. But this isn't about punishment. It's about accountability. If we want any future together, it has to be built on truth. Mom reached into her purse and pulled out a check. "This is the first repayment. It's not much, but it's a start." I didn't reach for it. "It's not about the money," I said. "It never was. It's about being seen, for once, really seen." "We see you now," Dad said quietly. "We didn't before. We failed you." I looked down at my hands. The same hands that signed every check, held every secret, covered every mistake. I looked back up. "You failed yourselves too," I said, "by letting fear dress up like love." Mom nodded slowly, tears falling. I stood up and walked to the side table where I kept the locket Grandma had given me. I held it out to them. "She saw this coming," I said, and she waited, for years, for someone to say enough. I placed the locket on the table between us, a symbol, a line in the sand. "I'm willing to rebuild," I said, "but not on old foundations." Dad nodded. "Then we start from scratch." We hugged, awkward, honest, no performative warmth. Just people finding their way back through the rubble. Later that evening, Whitney called. She sounded tired but clear. "I wrote a letter," she said, "to Grandma, apologizing. I told her everything, about the loans, the lies, everything." "How did she respond?" I asked. "She didn't," Whitney said. "She just hugged me." That's when I knew we were all rebuilding in our own ways. Some bricks cracked, some hands shaking, but the foundation finally real. If you've ever dared to rebuild a broken relationship, not because you had to, but because you chose to, on your own terms, tell me how it started. What did it cost you? What did it give back? Leave your experience in the comments. And if you've been told that family means never saying no, know this family isn't defined by who you're related to. It's defined by who's willing to do the work with you. Hit like, drop your thoughts, and subscribe if you're walking that same path. Because healing isn't clean, but it's worth it. Every single time. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the package arrived, thin, understated, stamped with the letterhead from the treatment center. For a moment, I stood frozen in my kitchen hands, hovering just above the envelope, heart braced for whatever truth might lie inside. I opened it. Inside was a printed letter, handwritten by Whitney, 8 pages front and back. There were no theatrics in her words, no manipulations, just raw honesty. The kind that doesn't come easy when your entire life has been a performance. Claire, I used to believe that if I looked the part, if I smiled, succeeded, sparkled, I could get away with anything. That as long as people liked me, nothing else mattered. And the worst part is, I didn't just believe it. I made others believe it too, especially you. I read slowly, breath held. I stole more than money. I stole peace. I stole time. I stole the version of you that could have been free sooner if you hadn't been spending all your energy covering for me. She didn't beg for forgiveness. She didn't expect anything. But in every word, I felt something I hadn't felt from her in years' awareness. And that changed everything. Later that evening, I called Grandma. She wrote to me too, she said, and for the first time, it didn't feel like another plea for sympathy. It felt like surrender. That's what it felt like for me too, I whispered. Grandma paused, then asked, "Are you proud of her yet?" I thought about it. Not yet, I admitted, but I'm hopeful. And that's more than I ever expected to be. The next day I visited her. The facility was tucked into a quiet neighborhood just outside the city trees. Bare winter wind brushing through the courtyard like time itself was pausing to watch this moment unfold. Whitney met me in the common room. She looked up as I entered, eyes wide, unsure. But this time she didn't stand up. She didn't perform. She just waited. I sat beside her, silent, stretching. "I got your letter," I said. Her hands trembled in her lap. "Was it too much?" "It was real," I replied. "And that's more than I thought I'd ever get from you." She nodded, biting the inside of her cheek. "I'm not asking you to trust me again," she said. "I just want to become someone worth trusting." Those words caught in my chest. For years I wanted Whitney to say she was sorry, to acknowledge the pain, the weight, the theft not just of money but of space, dignity, peace. But what I had needed even more than an apology was this. Change, chosen, earned. We talked for an hour, not as enemies, not even as sisters, but as two people finally facing each other without shields. She told me about group therapy, about the uncomfortable truths she had been forced to admit, about the shame that clung to her skin like smoke. "I don't want to be that girl anymore," she said softly. "You don't have to be," I answered, "but no one can walk that path but you." Before I left, she asked if I'd meet her therapist next week. Family integration session. I nodded. "Okay," I said, one step at a time. I walked out of the building lighter than I'd walked in, because something had shifted, not just in her but in me. I wasn't waiting for perfection. I wasn't holding out for a cinematic redemption arc. I was learning to live inside the in-between, where people are still broken, still trying, still unfinished. But honest. If you've ever given someone a second chance, not because they demanded it, but because they earned the right to try again, share that moment below. Who was it? What changed? Did it matter? Because sometimes the most radical thing we can do is believe in someone's capacity to be more than they were. If this story is helping you find your way through your own healing journey, like, subscribe, and let your voice be heard. This space is for people writing a new chapter, no matter how long the story's been messy. We don't start over because it's easy. We start over because somewhere in the wreckage, there's still something worth saving. The last family meeting didn't happen in a lawyer's office, a treatment center, or under the roof of the house I'd once paid for. It happened in my apartment 3 months after Thanksgiving. Snow was still falling, but softer now, like even winter was ready to let go. Mom brought lemon bars. Dad came in a heavy coat, though it wasn't that cold. Whitney showed up last on time, hair pulled back, dressed simply. No design or anything, just her and a small folder in hand. We sat around the kitchen table, the same one where I'd cried alone the night they uninvited me, the same one where I'd called my lawyer, the same one I almost sold when I thought I'd never want them in this space again. Now it was where everything changed. "I've completed the program," Whitney began, "and I've started paying back the debts. I've already paid off the first card. I have a spreadsheet for the rest." She passed the folder to Dad. He looked stunned, not by the numbers, but by the effort. "And I talked to HR," she continued. I was honest. I admitted what I did, what I've learned, and how I'm rebuilding. I won't be getting the promotion, but I still have a job. And now, I show up on time. I do the work. I stopped hiding. I looked at her, not with suspicion, but curiosity. Because this wasn't the Whitney I'd spent decades chasing, bailing out, and forgiving. This was someone I didn't know yet, but wanted to. Mom spoke next. "We're moving into the new house this weekend. Smaller, but we like it. We needed a reset." Dad nodded. "And I'm applying for a small business grant. Going to start that accounting firm, like you always said I should." The air shifted, not in some grand dramatic wave, but slowly, gently, like when ice starts to melt and you can hear water underneath waiting to flow again. Whitney turned to me. "I know it'll take time, and I'm not asking for a clean slate, but I'd like a chance to keep proving who I'm becoming." I nodded. "Then prove it. Not for me, for yourself." We ate together. No tension, no performance, just food, small talk, the clink of forks against plates. At the end, as they were getting ready to leave, Whitney hesitated. "Claire," she said, "Christmas is coming. We're not hosting some big thing. Just a small dinner at the new place. Just us. If you're open to it, we'd love for you to come. I didn't answer right away, and I think that was the answer they needed because, for once, they didn't expect me to say yes. I'll think about it, I said honestly. And for the first time, they didn't guilt me. They didn't beg. They just nodded and hugged me before leaving. Respectful, gentle, different. When the door closed behind them, I looked around my apartment. Everything was the same, and yet nothing was. I pulled out my journal, wrote 6 words. Sometimes peace means saying not yet. Because healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, it's inconsistent. It's a decision you make again and again even when your heart's still tender and your trust still bruised. But it's worth it. And I didn't do it to feel like the hero. I did it because I was tired of being the casualty. If you've ever found healing in a place you once thought was ruined, share that moment. What brought you back? What helped you stay? Leave a comment. Someone may need your hope today. Because this isn't just a story about money or family or betrayal. It's about reclaiming your voice. If this story resonated with your own, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me for what comes next. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not get even, but get free. And freedom, it's quieter than revenge, but infinitely more beautiful. After all the storms, the silence, and the hard conversations, I finally understood one undeniable truth: freedom isn't given, it's claimed. It's the courage to say no when everyone else says yes. The strength to walk away from what hurts you, even when it's wrapped in the word family. And the grace to allow others the chance to change, even if they stumble along the way. This journey wasn't about winning or losing. It was about healing. About breaking cycles that have haunted generations and building something new from the ruins. For me, that meant setting boundaries that once felt impossible, facing truths I'd long avoided, and trusting myself enough to hold the line. And for my family, it meant reckoning with their mistakes, accepting help, and starting over with honesty. It's messy, imperfect, and ongoing, but it's real. If you've ever carried the weight of fixing others at your own expense, I want you to know you don't have to carry it alone. Your worth isn't measured by how much chaos you absorb or how often you forgive without being seen. Sometimes love looks like saying no. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their own choices. So if this story touched you, if you see a piece of yourself in it, I invite you to join the conversation. Share your experiences, your boundaries, your moments of courage. Together we can build a community where strength is celebrated, healing is possible, and freedom is within reach. Remember, standing up for yourself isn't betrayal, it's self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of every healthy relationship. Thank you for listening, for being here, and for taking this journey with me. If you believe in the power of owning your story and living your truth, subscribe, share your wisdom below, and let's continue writing the next chapters together.